Well, good morning, because it is morning where we are, and welcome to the Economist Board for our April 2024 Watch Report. I'm John Nelson with M&A, and I'm joined today by Keith Prather of Armada. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. Yeah, glad to be here.
Great. And I'm going to remind everybody, or I'm going to inform everybody, we're filming this on a Monday morning. So any mistakes we made, yeah, if you're watching it on a Monday, you've got double problems. So anyway, in our videos, we're going to provide some additional context to the models and the narratives that you see in the watch. So this is kind of exclusive to our subscribers, if you will. And in this video, specifically, we're going to focus on industrial production for manufacturing. For our subscribers, we're going to dive deeper into the individual subsectors of manufacturing in a separate video behind the login. And then additionally, we have videos covering the transportation of goods and the construction sector, as well as a macroeconomic outlook, since consumer spending is 70% of overall GDP. We're going to take a look at advanced retail sales as part of that macroeconomic outlook. If you're not a subscriber, shame on you. So sign up for a free trial through our website. I think you can afford free. Let me emphasize again, it's for the free. It doesn't require a credit card or anything. And then you'll be able to get to see what you're missing. And then you're gonna clearly want to watch the rest of these videos for the rest of your life, realize that you didn't know where we were and how you survived without us. So then you're going to want to continue to subscribe. So enough of my blathering on. Keith, are you ready to get
Let's
going
go.
on it?
Let's rock and roll. Yep.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and if I can operate the computer, we're going to jump right into IPMAN. And here you go. And I think that the story about IPMAN this month is that it's pretty much telling the same story as last month. The only thing that I would say, two things I like to point out in IPMAN this month is one, where last month we had a bit of a hump, kind of about 3 to 4, about 5 months out. You can kind of see that's a little bit depressed, but the end point on all this, it's still saying this essentially the same thing. That hump is only about one or two additional index points. And by the way, IPMAN is on an index, 100 kind of being the baseline, and it was 2017 was the baseline measure for that. So that was 100, and it's moving along. This is kind of like the steady as she goes chart, is what I would say. One thing I like to point out, because we like to brag on ourselves a little bit, if you take a look at IPMAN, we were calling for a bit of an increase last month for the first month this time. We called for it. We were a little conservative. It increased a little bit more than what we thought it would, probably about a half to a full percentage point more than what we thought it would. But generally, it's a pretty solid story. And now that you take a look at the long-term thing, you can see that we're above trend line over for the long term. We're looking fairly solid, and it looks like the outlook remains above that 20-year trend line, Keith.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you look at this chart, that really does tell the story because it is, we're right at the top of, what looks like a historic range. So we're calling for, at least the model's calling for a fantastic, growth rate here. So I don't know. I think it's a good looking chart. The fact that it's kind of flat over the next 18 months or the what appears to be flat, it's still an elevated manufacturing sector. And I think it's being driven by a number of different things. We do believe that we've been telling this inventory story now, John, for about 18 months, and we know the destocking trend around the world is over. And what that means is that now, as we get a real like a new order for manufactured goods, it really energizes the entire supply chain. So before we were only energizing really from the manufacturer and the manufacturing gate, what we call manufacturing gate doors out. So brand new order comes in, they go to the warehouse, they pull an item off the shelf that's already been built, they fulfill that order. They don't have to fire up the assembly line. They don't have to use energy, labor, inputs of raw materials, inputs of component parts. And so it kind of stalls the entire global manufacturing sector. And we don't get as much activity. But now with the destocking process that's going on, we get one new order for an item, and now it's kind of energizing the entire supply chain. So for the first time in 18 months, you've got this brand new cycle where we are seeing at least activity, kind of on a global basis starting to pick up a little bit. And it's going to move now more in concert with what we get from the macroeconomic outlook. So last year we would get GDP growth of 2% or so. And, we were scratching our heads like, why is the freight market flat? Why is manufacturing flat or down? And it was because of that overstock situation. But now that we're back in line, we're starting to see some upticks in growth at a macro level, and we're getting that resulting increase in freight movement, supply chain activity, raw material demand. You're starting to see it all pick up at the same time. And so I'm not afraid of the forecast. I think the models nailed it. Some of the PMI surveys that we get on a monthly basis are a little bit weaker than expected, but like Europe is starting to rebound. We're getting pockets of Asia that are doing a little bit better. Even China's starting to recover a little bit. The USMCA markets between Canada, Mexico, and the US are also doing a little bit better. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out over the rest of the year. And so
Mhm.
an optimistic manufacturing model is absolutely in the cards.
Great, great. Okay, so you
Now
had
call me a liar.
mentioned,
Now
say
call me a
again?
liar. Now call
Yeah, I'll
me
call
a
you a
liar.
liar. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to play Stump the Chump just yet. So
No, 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 no. I know. It's coming though. I know.
see, it's coming. I
What are the
got my
next two
question.
charts?
I'm going to hide it from you. And for those of you who suspect that we rehearse these things in advance, no, we don't. And I like to play Stump the Chump with Keith and see if he's going to come up with a good answer.
Yeah.
But so here's my tough question. Do you want to take a look at the supply chain before the deep supply chain or fabricated metal first?
Well, no. I mean, let's go to primary metals and
All right, let's take a look at primary
let's go ahead
metals.
and
Let's
call me a
see.
liar right there.
Yeah, here we go. All right, so primary metals. Okay, we have this wonderful outlook, and we got the sliding off a cliff happen here, and it's been the same story month after month. The only thing I would say is a little bit different is again, just like with IPMAN, the initial increase is not as steep. In fact, it's almost completely flat now,
Right.
getting out of that initial increase. But it still pretty much looks like a slide at Wet and Wild, kind of taking a little bit of a gentle roll down.
Yeah. The next chart
Yep.
is
Next chart
staggering.
will kind of show it. And then this, it's not so much a gentle roll down, it's a pretty precipitous roll down.
Yeah, this is almost a recession call, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And it may only be a recession call in primary metals. And so what's interesting is, John, we've got so many different metrics that go into these models. I mean, 18 to 22 different metrics, depending on the independent, the model itself, and each of them that we do. But what's interesting about it is I'm going to go off chart for a second. I'm going to talk about what's going on in the primary metal market, which is different. So manufacturing is still doing pretty well, but like we're starting to get readings of maybe some pockets of the primary metal world where we're starting to see some dumping. And you are
Mm-hmm.
starting to see inventory dumping from around the world, which would reduce the need for US domestic primary metal production, which is what this chart shows. So this may suspect that, we've got steel being dumped on the market, copper, other raw materials that would go into production. And, we know that the Biden administration right now is starting to play a little bit tougher with China because they are concerned about a lot of dumping that's taking place. Um, so that may be what's really the backstory here, and that may be what's going on in this primary metal sector. As regardless of the fact that the manufacturing sector looks like it's going to show pretty good demand,
Right.
we do see this pressure showing up in primary metals. But
Well, and
again,
I was gonna mention that when I saw the article this last week in the Journal about the Biden administration, you had mentioned about putting pressure on it and possibly looking at some increase in tariffs. I was surprised to see it looked like only 20% of U.S. 20% or less of U.S. steel usage was actually coming from China. So where else is steel coming from that's influencing it so much? Or is that 20% having an outside impact on the primary metal market from your standpoint?
yeah, I mean, I think eventually it would. So if that 20% hike goes into effect, they put those tariffs in a certain spot, and they sort of calibrate the percent of increase on it. so that there won't be dumping, so that it just
Yeah.
doesn't make a lot of feasibility, doesn't make a lot of sense to try and import a lot of those materials. Now, I'll say at the same time they're looking at that 20% hike, I mean, the US dollar is surging. And when the US dollar surges, obviously it works like a discount rate against everything else in the world, yeah, because things are so much cheaper to buy. So I don't know when those tariffs would actually go into effect. I don't know if it would happen before, the election. I know they're talking about it. Maybe they're just trying to discourage the Chinese from dumping. But I do know that over the last year or two, think about copper supplies alone. China has basically stockpiled copper from all over the world. And so now as they produce copper products, those copper products are pretty cheap. I mean, they've gotten copper at a pretty inexpensive price. It's been subsidized by the government. And so, now you've got copper going on the global market, copper products that are pretty
Hmm.
cheap. And with a strong US dollar, I mean, it does make it tough. And so again, I think a lot of those pressures are kind of pushing back specifically on primary metals, and I think that could be part of the story.
Okay. Let's take a look at fabricated real quick. And, this has been saying again, the story is the same month to month. The story has been the same with primary metal. The story has been the same with fabricated metal. The story has been the same with IPMAN overall. If anything, it's a little bit more steep, but not tremendously so. From month to month, I wouldn't be surprised, since this has got a bit of a boost. I wouldn't be surprised, based on how I've seen these metrics move, particularly those with a little bit of a wider cone of variability, for next month, this to drop down a little bit, just from what I've seen in the past. But again, fairly strong in the fabricated metal side, at least for the next 18 months. In context, you can't complain.
Yeah, and again, fabricated metals, I think, rides on the coattails of other industries, right? So we're going to get, they're going to get a boost out of anything happening in automotive, aerospace, machinery, all those other sectors that are included in the watch. And I think as we go forward over the next couple of months, some of the issues in the aerospace sector are probably going to push those models down. We have a forecast, but then you have actual market activity, and we know that at least one of the aerospace providers is being hit pretty hard. So I think that will weigh on this, as you said, and kind of flatten it out a little bit. I think automotive also, the outlook for automotive is starting to flatten, if not start to decline a little bit. And so I think that will push this down. But this is also being helped a little bit by what's going on in the construction industry.
Mm.
Because you think about so much non-residential construction and even residential construction now, and that looks like it's going to be going through a strong trend through 2024 into 2025. And so a lot of that will kind of help boost this fabricated metal product sector. The other thing is we're going to be getting a little bit of an uptick from the machinery sector. There's, three different components there, and they look like they're doing pretty well. Again, if you're not a subscriber, you don't have a trial, just go get a trial long enough, as John said, they're free, and go check out those other models. Go check out what we're seeing there, because I think that will affect what happens in the fabricated metal sector. And right now, it's still pretty optimistic for fab metal.
Got it. All right. Well, that concludes our look at the top level of industrial production and for manufacturing in the two key feeders. Any closing comments on it, my friend?
No, I mean, I think generally manufacturing around the world looks like it's picking up a little bit. So we are seeing some improvements. And again, that'll create some interesting cross currents and tailwinds, and a few challenges. I mean, that makes input costs go up a little bit. So we've got a little bit of an inflationary pressure that's building, that wasn't there, 2, 3 months ago. We're starting to see Europe, as I said, come back to life. And we didn't talk about the defense sector. And, we just got $98 billion in new appropriated funds, and they're estimating about 90% of that's going to go into the defense manufacturing sector, and immediate appropriations for immediate production of, military products. Let's say it that way.
Sure.
And and that's obviously going to create a boost in the industry, because there's a ripple effect and a multiplier effect that goes along with that money. So you take 98 billion, and by the time it starts actually getting spent in the economy, you're probably going to be able to throw a 1.5 to maybe a 2 times multiplier on top of that. So it's a 200 to $250 billion boost to the U.S. manufacturing sector. So it'll be interesting.
Okay. Well, that concludes it on industrial production. And so if you're not a subscriber, just a little teaser, we're going to do all the subsectors next that Keith was telling you about. So hope you get a chance to catch us on those. Take care, and we'll talk next month.
Very good. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.